So I'm going to try to patch in a segment from George Carlin, the late great George Carlin, prior to this section of the film. And George Carlin said that, and I'm paraphrasing, that humanity has squandered great gifts. The opposable thumb, our dynamic brains, and any number of other huge advantages that we have as opposed to other species that populate this planet. And with that in mind, I was thinking about that today when I was reading the corporate media, the mass media, over my smartphone from work, and the top 20 headlines were morose and depressing and fear-mongering. Russian nukes this, tariffs that, and school shooting this, school shooting that. And don't get me wrong, I have the most empathy and compassion in the world for any victims of such crimes. I have kids myself and would lose my mind, frankly, if they were involved in an atrocious act such as that. However, that being said, I'm going to throw a shout out in here to my man, the Canadian prepper, who did a fantastic analysis on the knee-jerk response of North American society to these events, which is always to yank our rights away. And as compassionate as a human being as I am, I also understand the systemic difficulties that we face today. And one thing that my man Canadian Prepper pointed out was that last year was reported that it was now down to 8 individuals. 8 individuals that controlled as much wealth, owned or controlled as much wealth as the lower 50% of the world's population. 8 people. So, let me throw a few numbers at you. As of earlier today, the world's population is roughly 7.6 billion people. So divided by 2, 3.8. You're talking 8 people control as much wealth in the world as 3.8 billion people. 8 individuals. So this is not a call to communism, socialism, any other style of governance, political system. It is again an analysis of where we're at as a civilization, and my guess is that having studied all these different political systems, from socialism to communism to democracy to different economic systems, laissez-faire economics, a more heavily regulated system, running the gamut. My guess is that humanity has not yet reached the proper balance of a system that merges politics and economy in such a way that humanity is more fully respected and represented. And I think that we will see a new form of governance slash economic merger sometime in the next century. I don't believe that we will run into the next century with any current system that we're aware of today, because of these systemic issues that I'm pointing out. Eight people controlling the wealth that 3.8 billion people control together is unsustainable on any metric. It's not. There's no debate. There is none. It's just finite resources and a economic system that refuses to remove themselves from the desires of greed and continues to try to make money off a unsustainable course. So I think that we're capable of overcoming these obstacles for sure, but I do not think that any system is in place at the moment to do that. And back to the mass media, they're selling all these things. They're selling their agenda to you on any given day. So the mass media is controlled by essentially two groups, Reuters and the Associated Press, and you could make the argument that it boils down to about one man. It's up for debate, but regardless, you have a plutocracy of sorts that's controlling what we read, what we watch on TV every day, what we consume as our news. And I think that you should be careful of taking it hook, line, and sinker, because that's dangerous. And what is it dangerous to? It is dangerous to our liberty. It is dangerous to our sovereignty. And the mass media, as it stands today, is controlled primarily by two groups, Reuters and the Associated Press. Now, these two groups control most of the major media outlets and networks that we consume daily, whether it be CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, what have you. And yet, these different news sources, channels, push these divisive agendas, arguing counterpoints to each other daily and keeping people divided, which is problematic given that it's all coming from the same ownership groups. So, Ted Turner, who was the founder of CNN, has held various other positions as a media mogul. It's worth about $2.2 billion. I'm going to patch in an interview of his that exposes to me where some of the intentions of these major media moguls really lie.
Not doing it will be catastrophic. We'll have 8 degrees, we'll be 8 degrees hotter in 30 or 40 years, and basically none of the crops will grow. Most of the people will have died, and the rest of us will be cannibals. Civilization will have broken down. What the few people who are left will be living in a failed state like Somalia or Sudan, and living conditions will be intolerable. The droughts will be so bad there'll be no more corn growing. Not doing it is suicide. Just like dropping bombs on each other, nuclear weapons is suicide. So we've got to stop doing the two suicidal things, which are hanging on to our nuclear weapons
and global
and then after that we've got to stabilize the population. When I was born, there
so what's wrong with the population? I mean,
with too many people. That's why we have global warming. We have global warming because too many people are using too much stuff. But if there were less people, they'd be using less stuff.
As a part of my studies in school, I was required to read Plato's Republic, and Plato, obviously a Greek philosopher, student of Socrates. So as a part of his major work, the Republic, there's a subsection known as the cave allegory. The in the cave allegory, Plato is describing what it's like being a citizen um, in the under the Athenian-ruled Greek democratic system, and so in the allegory, there's a group of people, and they are chained in a cave, um, facing only a cave wall. All that they can see is shadows cast upon that cave wall from a campfire that is backlit to them. There are periodically people carrying animals and or tools, things by and casting shadows on this cave wall. But as the shadows are all that the people that are chained ever see or know, that is their reality. Eventually one day, one of the prisoners chained is released from his shackles and allowed to go outside of the cave. He's initially blinded by the light, and but eventually grows accustomed to it and explores the real world. Finally, one day, after seeing the sun, which is the source of all life as they know it, and seeing his own shadow from the sun, a reality sets into him. He returns to the cave in an attempt to tell his fellow shackled prisoners the truth about the world. Now, the other shackled prisoners have a very hard time accepting this. They reject the notion violently and do not want to be released from their chains. They believe their friend, former prisoner, to have become stupid as a result of his journey, crazy, if you will, and thus continue to live their life with their blinders on. Stood what the allegory meant or was getting at, but I think it's very relevant when we analyze our current media consumption, that it's easy to get sucked in to a dialogue, a particular dialogue or narrative that is being pushed in front of us, and not allowing us, by staying in this divisive argument constantly along partisan lines, what have you, to miss the truth of the real issues, what's really going on. And as Mr. Turner sees it, vast overpopulation and finite resources. These movers and shakers, they understand the issue. They understand that having 8 individuals control as much wealth as 3.8 billion people on this planet is not sustainable. They understand that. And they're not stupid. They didn't get to where they are by being stupid. So thus my warning about the horde mentality and taking the bait of any given issue that is pushed in front of you daily. Take it with a grain of salt. As lemmings, they group together and they pile off the cliff together. So, take the things that are being pushed in front of you, sold to you daily by the media, with a grain of salt, and understand that if we give up our rights, any rights, we cease to be citizens and become subjects. We're subjugated. So I would warn against giving up your rights, whether it's right to free speech, whether it's right to own and bear firearms, whether it's any rights that are afforded to us today. So, be well, my friends, and put some thought into it. I am the lone Viking on Stamford Bridge. Stay tuned.